you so much for being here today, Dr. Aumatma. I'm really excited for our conversation, and I know the well-empowered crowd is as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. And today's just going to be a real casual conversation. We connected via email. I've listened to your podcast. You do fabulous work. And for those of you who have not yet listened to Dr. Aumatma's podcast, it is Egg Meets Sperm. And I'm going to open up the floor here for you to just share a little bit about yourself and what had you be so interested not just in being a naturopathic doctor, as which you are, but also really the specialty of fertility?
It's a funny story, actually. I was married to this man who started, it was about 6 months, 8 months into our relationship. He started talking about wanting children. And I don't know why it had not occurred to me before, but as soon as he started talking about it, I felt my uterus just being like, no. And I was like, oh God. um,
Visceral
so
response.
yeah, and I was like, oh, I did not expect that. And okay, I better start thinking about what is happening here. Like, why is my uterus screaming? And it turned out that it was not a visceral response to ever wanting children. It became clear to me that I actually wanted children, but I didn't want them with him. And I was like, okay, so if that's the case, then just in my head, I was like, it's taken me 10 years to find him. We dated for 5 years, then we finally got married. Okay, so I am right now like 32, 33.
Mhm.
Like, I need to get my act together. Like, we
Right.
need to get
Okay.
a
So
divorce.
47 is my
I didn't
next.
even
Right.
cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that just sent me into kind of a query around what I could do for myself to preserve fertility and have a baby later. And I looked into
Mhm.
egg freezing, which at the time was just like starting to become popular. And I was like, well, that sounds like a good idea. But back then, at least, there was like a 1% chance that those eggs would turn into real live babies. And I was like, yeah, that's not a chance that I'm willing to take for $20,000.
Right. That's an expensive bet. Yeah. Yeah.
So I just dove into research for like in 9 months. I was literally like in the weeds with all of the research around fertility. And I was like, surely there's something we can do.
Yeah.
And then I like as I was researching, I was sharing it with people and they were like, "Oh my God, I've never heard of this. Why can't more people be talking about it?" And then before I knew it, people were like, "Great, you can help me with fertility." I was like, "No, all of my stuff is theoretical." I'm not trying to help
Right, right,
anybody.
right.
I
Oh my
just went
gosh, that
into
is
this for
so
myself.
funny. I just wanted the science. I just wanted the
Yeah.
academics. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
and people just wouldn't stop. They just kept coming, and I was like, "Oh boy, okay, this is really happening."
And have you
Um,
kept count of how many people you've gotten pregnant?
yeah, I think we're on like 897 babies.
All right. Look at that. Oh my gosh, you're bound to hit 1,000 before the year's through. I mean, that's you're right.
That would be great.
That's fabulous. That is
Yes.
really great. Maybe not babies at this point, but pregnancies. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
pregnancies.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's fabulous. That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. 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 Well, then let's dive into some of the juiciness, some of the science that you have discovered over the course of your work and doing what you do. And I'd love for you to share a little bit, Dr. Aumatma, about you like me also, I'm a huge proponent of test, don't guess.
Yeah.
And while I do dabble in fertility, I totally got like that this is your jam, like you are an expert. So let's hear from you a little bit more, anything you want to say about that, about testing, whether it's what tests you find most essential or, things that are commonly overlooked when people are doing tests.
Yeah, I think the first and foremost is actually doing the basic testing, which sounds basic. And people might be like, oh, I've already done that a million times. But what I found is that this is not common, and a lot of people aren't being told by their doctors when to get this testing. So it's really important that we understand our hormones are shifting all cycle long. So we want a baseline, or like when all of the hormones are about the lowest is going to be cycle day 2, 3, or 4. So we want to get that testing on cycle day 2, 3, or 4 just to see how are these hormones in relationship with each other at their lowest point. Other points in the cycle, they're going to fluctuate a lot more, and it can vary a lot more from person to person. So we get this baseline, and the 4 tests that I think are really crucial are FSH, estradiol, LH, and AMH. And I think they're like so basic, but it's still to this day a hurdle for people to get those tests from their doctors and actually get them on the right day, and then the interpretation of those tests. So yes,
And to
get
say those
tests.
tests again: FSH, estradiol, LH, and AMH.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
and you and I, we speak the same language, but can you say a little bit about the type of information you get from each of those values? And you said on day 2,
yes,
2 or
day
3?
2, 3, or 4.
2, 3, or
So
4.
there's a little
Okay.
bit of flexibility if it falls on your weekend or whatever. You've got some flexibility. So what we're looking at from those tests is a few things. One is just the FSH, if that's follicle stimulating hormone. If that hormone is very high, and very high is anything above 10. If that hormone is high, that's telling me that the brain is screaming at the ovaries to produce follicles. It shouldn't have to scream. The ovary and brain have an intimate relationship, and they need to be able to hear each other without screaming. And if they're screaming in either direction, that's a problem. They're not in a good relationship. So that's telling us, okay, are these 2 things working together? And if that FSH is high, then it's telling us also that if the screaming is happening, we need to figure out why. Is it stress? Is it, and a lot of times after an emotional stressor, I've seen this FSH go into the hundreds.
Wow, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
and
Wow.
it's like it's enough of a pattern now that anytime I see that, I'm like, did you have an emotional stressor in the last 3 years? And almost always it's a yes. So,
Wow.
and that's a good thing, right? Like if we know what it is, then we know whether or not we can reverse it. So a lot of these women are told, oh, you're menopausal because your FSH is in the hundreds. Versus when they come to us, I'm like, well, your FSH is in the hundreds, not 20, which is great. That's great news for me because that means I could do something about it. I can reverse it, and you can probably still have a baby.
Yeah.
So you're going to get very different information based on who you talk to about your hormones. So really that FSH between 20 and I usually like 20 to 75, that's potentially menopausal.
Got it.
But when it's crazy high, I love it because those are the people that get written off, and there's lots of things we can do to support them.
That's
Um,
amazing.
mhm. And then the other thing we're looking at is the ratio of FSH and LH. And this
Okay.
ratio is, we want it to be about 1-to-1. When the LH is a lot higher than FSH, that's telling us that there's some indicator that there might be PCOS. So LH is the ovulation hormone. If LH
Right.
is high, it's also a hormone from the brain to the ovary. But if that one's high, it's telling us there's something happening with the ovulation that we need to focus on. And PCOS is often the biggest problem. So those are the indicators. And then estradiol is a funny one because a lot of people think of that as a bad guy. I am like, well, estradiol is extremely necessary. And I've seen cases, I had a woman, it's probably 3 years ago now. Her estradiol was 9 when she came in, or 7, something ridiculously low. Optimal for us is 40 to 50. So at 7, I was like, this is very, very low. Has anyone ever told you that? And she was like, no, what? I've been through like so many different treatments for 6 years. This woman had been on the fertility train. And she was like, no one has ever told me that. And she's on the phone crying. And I was like, I'm sorry that I have to be the first one to tell you. But with an estrogen this low, I would expect that you've got vaginal dryness, your body sort of thinks you're in menopause, right? Like you have all the symptoms, your skin is saggy, you're
And
just
how old
not
was she
feeling
roughly?
well. She was 39.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So very young to have that
Mm-hmm.
kind of low estrogen. And she was like, oh my God, I have all of these symptoms, and no one's ever thought, like, connected that to my fertility. Lo and behold, 4 months later, her estrogen's like 37. And she's like, I feel amazing. She literally looked like her skin had pulled up, like she had a treatment,
Facelift,
you
of
know?
course.
Got a facelift,
An
got some
estrogen
Botox.
facelift. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was like, I feel amazing. I have cervical fluid. I have like my periods are back. I'm cycling again. So all that to say, like estrogen is just so important in our bodies, and in the fertility world, especially, I think it gets a bad rap.
Mm.
Um, but we really want it in this optimal phase. If it's really
And for
high,
her, are you able to shed any light on for her why it was low? I know, like the same symptom or number can have
oh,
quite a few different reasons. So
yeah,
please, any listener, this is not a one size fits all. I'm just curious if you
yeah.
remember. You may not because you see
I
so many
think
people.
I do remember because she was just so like one of those really unique cases. Uh, she for work had a landscaping business where she went out and did landscaping.
Uh-huh.
So she had all of these exposures to toxic
As you
chemicals.
said that, I was like, oh no, no, no.
Right. So that was the reason that her
Mhm.
her hormonal system had collapsed, was because of her toxic
Her
exposure,
detox
her
pathway was
burden. Yeah.
overwhelmed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And usually, like in that scenario, we might expect a high estrogen. For her, it just presented as low estrogen. So
Got it.
it was a lot of detox, a lot of like coaching around, okay, who else can you like send out to the jobs instead of yourself? And for a long time, she was just like unwilling. She was like, no, I have to go, I have to be there. I have to like oversee everything. And I was like, okay, control freak, like totally get it. Right. And she was like, stop it. I've always been this way. And I'm like, I know.
Yeah,
That's part of the
right.
problem.
Uh,
So she was finally able to like turn it around. She yeah, just by the end of our time together, she just felt really amazing. Unfortunately, she was just like so primed to get pregnant. And then the partner that she was with for 10 years left.
oh gosh.
And I was like weeping for her because I was like,
Yeah.
man, all of this work that we've done, like we're so
Yeah.
close. And I'm like, you sure you just don't want to have a kid with him, even though he's leaving? But she was like, no, I'm good. I'm good. I feel good. Like I've gotten what I need. At least I feel better than I did when
Yes.
I came in, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
Um,
And who knows, maybe a couple of years later she met the right person and
yeah,
her
yeah.
body
And
was ready. She knew what to do.
she's in touch every now and then. She's like still feeling good, still looking for her guy. So we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, she might be among the making it to 1,000 this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
The
awesome.
the other side of estradiol is the high. The high estrogen is very problematic because it will suppress FSH. And I see this like very, very often where women have high estrogen, but their FSH looks perfect on paper.
Mhm.
So their FSH, remember, is below 10, you guys. So if the FSH is below 10, then even the most like basic doctor will be like, yeah, you're fine, you're fine. Like it looks good. The problem is they never connected it to the estrogen. So if that estrogen was high, it's going to go and suppress that FSH and make it look like it's optimal, but it's not. So that's where things get really dicey. And high estrogen can be, as we were talking about before, toxins. It can be where you have a lot of estrogen mimicking compounds in the body that could cause the estrogen to be high. But then also things like metabolizing estrogen. So
Mhm.
is your liver working properly? Is your gut working properly? There's a whole bunch of things that need to happen to get that estrogen out of the system.
And so when that estrogen is high, I would imagine then you're like going down a whole new rabbit hole to figure out the source of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
these like hormones are giving us the baseline or like a sense into what might be going on. They're not giving us all of the answers as to why
Yes.
it's happening.
Yes. It's like
So
collecting breadcrumbs, right?
yeah, you get like, okay, this might be the case. Now we know what to test so that we're not giving you $10,000 worth of testing. We can really focus it into like, oh, if your estrogen's low, you're probably going to have a vaginal microbiome issue. So we're going to test your vaginal
Mm,
microbiome. Um, so being able to connect the dots on which testing is the most crucial and at what point is it important and necessary is
yeah.
why we exist, right? Like if people
Yes.
like you and me are like the detectives to save you from thousands of dollars of tests so that you
Yes.
can get answers.
Absolutely. I love that you said that word because I also describe myself as a detective often because it really does, it feels like it, right? It's like
Yeah.
we are doing detective work,
Yeah,
physiological, biological detective work. Yeah,
exactly.
totally. And then can you say a little bit more about AMH for those
Mm.
who are not familiar with that?
Yeah, AMH is a fun one, and I can do a whole like hour on AMH alone. But the way this is called anti-Müllerian hormone, it's the way that I think about it is like your ovaries have a ton of eggs, right? You have all these eggs that you were born with, and your AMH is like the dam that keeps them all from fertilizing all at once. So this dam is stronger or weaker depending on how many eggs you have that it needs to
Mhm.
hold, right?
That's the
If you
best
have
description I've ever heard, Dr. Aumatma. Like, really, I love that analogy. That is so good.
yeah. So that's why it's anti-Müllerian, right? Like I
Mhm.
always, for a long time, I was like, what is this anti? Like, what is it anti doing? So it took me a while to like really put the pieces together. But it became popular because what they realized during IVF cycles was when someone had an AMH below 1.06, they were going to be less likely to have a positive, successful IVF cycle. So it became popular from this idea of if your AMH is below 1.06, it's low and you're going to have a crappy cycle.
Mhm.
What it has now turned into is when someone has an AMH below 1.06, they're actually getting feared into doing IVF sooner, which makes no sense, right? Like, if you think about where this number came from, it's like you have low ovarian reserve and you are going to be a poor responder to IVF. So, really, that for us, that AMH below 1.06 all the way down to 0.1, 0.1 that like gray zone are people. I'm like, please do not do
Mm.
IVF because you're going to have a less likely chance of success when you have that low ovarian reserve. We don't need a ton of eggs if you're doing natural fertility. You only need a ton of eggs if you're doing IVF. So it gives you a sense of where is your ovarian reserve. And sometimes it can be helpful to know what your ovarian reserve is so that you can say, like I did when I first started, like I have maybe 3, maybe 4 years before I'm not going to have any eggs left. So it is a helpful indicator of like how much time or how much of a rush this should be to have you get pregnant. Now, it doesn't always track. So I've seen AMH be 2 and then 5 months later it's down to 0.5, right? Like it
Wow.
can
Okay.
crash quickly.
Yeah.
So and it's not a good indicator because it fluctuates a lot. So I use it sparingly. It's like it's nice to have. It's
Mhm.
really helpful to know, especially for our women that are above 38. I feel like it's a really important value to keep in mind. And if someone has an AMH that's very low when we start, if she's starting at like AMH of 0.3, then we're going to have a very real conversation even before getting started of like, hey, this number is really low. It may mean that we have very little time to be able to get you to that point of success. And hopefully, we have enough things that we're doing around your fertility that is going to support and maybe sometimes increase that AMH. It's not a guarantee, but we've seen about 50% of the time it'll go up. So it's not
Awesome. Is
impossible.
that related to because it's related to a quantity, but it's not related to egg quality.
No,
So
not at
even all the work
all.
you do to improve egg quality is not gonna, but yeah, okay, got it.
So
Interesting.
the way I think about the increase in AMH, I talked to a really cool RE about 10 years ago, and I had been
And
seeing,
Ari is reproductive endocrinologist for those
yeah,
those of
oh,
you
thank
listening. Yeah, yeah,
you.
yeah,
Thank
yeah. No
you. A
worries.
lot of jargon. Um, I was just like, we met for coffee, and he is a cool guy. I was like, let's just meet. We're kind of in the same area. So, I'm like, just hanging out with him, and I was like, listen, I have ran this by other REs who think I'm a total quack, to be the honest truth.
Right, right.
And basically, like, I keep seeing these AMHs that increase, and I do not understand because all of the data says AMH only decreases and never increases. And his insight was very insightful. He's like, I don't do what you do, but I understand what you do. And because you're supporting blood flow, circulation, and in effect, nutrients getting to the ovaries, his hypothesis was that there are follicles that are sleeping. Follicles are
Mm.
primordial eggs, basically, like before they
Mhm.
become eggs. They are in a sleeping state because they've never had the nourishment to open and develop. And you brought in the right nutrients, the right blood flow, the right
Mm.
environment for them to flourish. It's like a flower that hasn't opened and then all of a sudden it opens. And I was like, oh, that's so beautiful. I like that visual. I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna take it. Like,
That
that's
totally
the
adds
best
up.
explanation that I've heard
Yeah.
of why we see this, because like nothing else really explains why AMH can sometimes go up. And I'm obsessed with like trying to still figure this out, which is how do we predict who it will go up in and who it won't? And I don't have an answer yet. But like if I can predict that, then I can save people a lot of time and money, right? I can be like, oh,
Yeah,
your
for
AMH is too low.
sure.
We're never gonna get it to go up. Sorry, but no thanks. And other
Yeah.
people to be like, oh yeah, we got this. It's just gonna go up.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I don't know. But it's a question that bugs me a lot because I am one of those people that just wants to know. Like, how do
Yeah,
I figure this
right.
out for people?
And I imagine you do see a correlation between increased AMH and, people having a successful pregnancy.
Well, yes and no. Like there was a woman, she's 32 years old. Her AMH when she came in was 0.1
Oh my gosh.
at 32. And she didn't
Mm,
have any of the markers that I usually would expect. So if she had an autoimmune condition, if she had just things that like toxin burden, something that I could be like, oh, that's why
yeah.
your AMH is low. She didn't. She didn't have any of those things.
Uh-huh.
And I ended up working with her just because she she was like, it doesn't matter, like we're never going to do IVF, we're never going to do an egg donor, like if this doesn't work with you then we're not doing anything and we just want to
Hmm.
have a child. And I was like, okay, all right, so at least I'm not like taking her away from something else. So we tried
Right.
it and we did 6 months. Our program's usually 4 to 6 months, so 6 months later we did a retest and all of her hormones had improved except the AMH, still 0.1. And that cycle, 2 weeks later, basically, she got pregnant.
Oh
Uh,
my gosh. So exciting.
so there's a part of me that's like, how much does this actually matter? Right? Like,
Hmm.
is the AMH just so important that it's gonna make it or break it? Or is it like not giving us a whole lot beyond whether or not people can be successful with IVF? And I don't know the answer to that. I feel like it's probably a combination. I know from her labs, her FSH and LH were super low. So with someone with a
Mm.
low AMH, we expect the brain to be screaming
Screaming.
louder
Yeah.
because the ovaries are not going to respond as well. Hers
Hmm.
was the opposite. And that was the point at which I was like, okay, something's not fitting. Like, even
Hmm.
though your ovaries are low, your brain isn't like activated about it.
Yeah. Were her
So,
adrenals shot? Do you remember?
oh, I don't remember her adrenals being shot, but
Yeah.
she, per my assessment, I was like, you have relative energy deficiency syndrome. And that's where we'll often see the brain is not fully
Mm,
functioning like it should. So she basically were like high protein, high complex carbs, like way up the calories, more fat, and her hormones improved, right? And her
right.
cycle improved. So it's all of the kind of nuances that I'm sometimes like able to pick up on just from these four hormones that we can be like, okay, at least we can determine, can we support you? Is it going to be successful or
Yeah.
is this a waste of your time and money?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And
awesome.
yeah, and I like just to be able to do that is a value add because there's a lot of people and I feel like it's at least from what I keep hearing from the people I talk to is like there's this surge of coaches out here that are like, oh, we can help you have a baby. And
You're
very
like, maybe.
infrequently, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you the truth, and
Yes.
it's based just on my experience, but at least it's not, I don't want people to waste precious time on
Yeah.
their journey, right? If I'm
That's
not the one for
wonderful.
you, I want people to be like, just go somewhere else. you got this, just go somewhere else. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, I'll refer you to like 5 other people, right? And so
Yeah.
the hormone analysis, I feel like, is down to the science where I know exactly who the people are that we can make a difference for and the people who we can't. And that value is like so important. And like I would want someone who can do that for me, right? So
Absolutely. It's like keeping the eye on their prize because that's what we're there for, right?
right.
We're like their outcomes are what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah, that's great. Well, I could talk to you like for many more hours on the topics of tests, but in service of letting our listeners learn more from
Mhm.
you, I'd love to hear. Oh my goodness, I'm like concerned we're not going to get to all the things we want to talk about, but let's hear from you. What someone can do if they're not ready for IVF?
That's a great question. So we already are starting to think about what if we can understand what their tests say. The test that we didn't talk about, which I think a lot of people focus on, is progesterone.
Mhm.
And progesterone, I don't usually run it because it needs to be at a different point in the cycle. So
Mhm.
optimal testing time for progesterone is 7 days post ovulation. So A, you need to know when you're ovulating, and B, you want to count 7 days out from that to get the accurate progesterone. In this one, we're testing at the peak of when you're going to have the most progesterone. What you can tell from progesterone that I think is a value add for people that most doctors are not assessing is an estimate of egg quality, because the shell of that egg is what is making the progesterone for the 2 weeks during your luteal phase. So if the quality of that egg and the shell is good, it's going to make good levels of progesterone. Versus if it's not that good, then it's not going to make good levels of progesterone. So that progesterone can give us a clue of, is it worth it to do IVF? Like, let's suppose all of your day 3 hormones were optimal. Then it would be, let's assess the progesterone and see where it is. Because if that level is not optimal, then the solution is not to give you progesterone, but to actually focus on the quality of the eggs.
Mm.
So, in my opinion, like, I think where a lot of people go awry is thinking either I'm trying on my own naturally
Mhm.
or I'm going to IVF. And I think that there are two
Mm.
extremes, right? Like, yes,
Mhm.
you should try on your own for a while, but do you need to wait for that initial day 3 testing? Do you need to wait for progesterone testing? They're all like very basic, inexpensive tests that you can do pretty quickly if you
Are you
have.
testing that progesterone? Are you doing just a blood test for that?
Mhm,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm, mhm,
We again, I don't do it that often because we don't have these people that are like, what should I do before I do IVF? It's really rare. They're already like, we've done 6 failed cycles. Now what?
mhm.
Um,
Right.
so
Uh-huh.
we're seeing people on the other end of the spectrum, but I think that period before considering IVF is a really sweet time to get support with really shifting the game, in the sense
Mm.
of, you could look at your cycles. Are they optimal? Are you having a 12 to 14 day luteal phase? Do you know when you're ovulating? Have you timed ovulation? These are all things you do on your own, by the way. You get one of those like Mira, Uva, one of those like at home urine testing devices, and see what it tells you about your cycles. And then you look at the rest of your life and you say, okay, like being very, very, very honest. Do I have high levels of stress? And I say very, very, very honest because the number of times I talk to women, they're like, I'm not stressed. I'm not stressed at all. I'm good. And I'm like, lady, are you out of your mind?
Right.
Like,
Okay. So tell me about that. You sleep 4 hours a night. You do CrossFit 6 days a week.
right.
You're
Yeah.
10 pounds lighter than it would is right for your body.
Right. Right.
Whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
travel for work and
Yep. And you like crash as soon as you hit your pillow or you can't fall asleep at night and then you're wired, right? Like there's so many indicators that our bodies are out of whack, but we're not listening.
yeah.
So really looking at and evaluating all areas of our body, mind, spirit and saying, is everything as optimal as I could imagine? Not
Mm.
according to my age. Not this is what it feels like to be 35, right? Because the number, even men, like I've heard guys say this repeatedly, oh, it's just my age. I'm
Oh my
getting
gosh, that
old.
cracks me up to no end. Especially when I have like a 35-year-old who says that, I'm like, I'm sorry, wait,
Yeah.
what?
Right. I'm
Oh
like,
no, no.
you're
There's
young.
something happening here for you,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So don't accept the age answer. Like
Yeah,
it's not as simple as you're old.
right.
Or even what a lot of women are told, oh, your eggs are too old. I'm like, yeah, that's not a
Right.
thing.
Yeah,
Like
right.
there
Hmm.
is a point when your eggs are too old, but it's probably 10 years from now.
Right.
So
Right. And
um
when you, to say a little bit more about improving egg quality, right? So turning back to progesterone,
yeah.
I think about, and like, again, I just want to give the disclaimer, ladies, please don't do this without someone's guidance. Like you actually want numbers because um, things might not go well if you take the do it yourself approach to some of these supplements. But
Yeah.
I think about DHEA, I think about CoQ10, vitamin E, reducing inflammation, making sure toxins are being cleared properly, things like that. Anything else that comes to mind for that we should keep an eye on?
Adrenal and thyroid function.
Adrenal and thyroid function, yeah.
And then nutritional status. So I'm a believer
Mm-hmm.
of testing the nutrients before giving them, right? So
I agree completely.
I feel like this fad of CoQ10, and I pick on CoQ10, it's just an example, it's not the end all be all. But
Right.
everyone in the fertility world is like, oh, trying to get pregnant, better take my CoQ10.
Yes.
And I have to laugh because it almost never shows up on testing as a
Mm-hmm.
need that the body
Mm-hmm.
has.
Well, and what do
Almost
you
never.
consider a need? What would you consider optimal CoQ10?
Well, so CoQ10 actually we test through a nutrient assay.
Yeah,
And the nutrient testing we do just shows like high need, moderate
I
need, or
see.
low
Okay,
need.
got it.
So it's almost always on the low side.
Yeah.
And as far as an antioxidant, I'm not sure that it's as potent as some other antioxidants. So
Hmm.
seeing that trend got me, I'll go to the PubMed studies, and the research actually for CoQ10 is that it's helpful in
Hmm.
older women. This is exactly what the paper said. Older women, meaning over 40 or above, who are doing IVF, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's a very specific subset of people that
In a
benefit from
specific
CoQ10.
situation.
Right.
Yeah. Right, right, right,
And
right.
then
Yeah.
we take that and we're like, oh, CoQ10 is going to help everybody. Everyone take CoQ10, put it in the water.
Right.
It doesn't actually work that way. So
Right.
so really being mindful of which supplements to take and
Hmm.
getting some guidance around what makes the most sense to supplement for your body. It's
Hmm.
going to be the things that are going to be most antioxidant beneficial for your cells that are going to make the most difference. So, yeah, so doing the things that are going to give you the most value are going to be the things that help bring your nutrients, hormones, toxins, all like they move the needle for you
Yeah.
instead of everybody should do this, right? And
Yes. Agreed.
yeah, so really like nailing down like what are the things that are my issues and how do I target those specific things? That's going to save a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of
Mhm.
supplements, and a lot of
Yes.
energy. And
Absolutely.
like frustration of, oh, I've been taking this forever and it's not doing anything, or I've done all this is I've heard this a million times. I've done everything.
Right.
They're like, what are you gonna do that's different? And I'm like, well, you could have done everything, but not the one thing that you really needed to do, and that's why you're stuck.
Yes.
That's what I'm gonna help you figure out.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I'm a detective. I'm here to
Right.
help. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. Well, just for those of you listening, we might run a few minutes late here. But I'd love to hear from you. Um, 3 keys to supporting fertility and hormones.
Yeah, great. So, um, 3 keys. I would say knowing your hormone status and there we didn't talk about this, but there's a test called Dutch test, which a lot of people are
Mhm.
familiar with.
Mhm.
It is measuring hormones throughout a whole cycle as well as the
Mhm.
metabolizing of those hormones, which is really helpful to making sure that you have hormones releasing at the right time in your cycle. So this happens frequently where estrogen is high in the luteal phase over progesterone. It's not great for
Not
fertility.
ideal.
It's giving us
Right.
the
Yes.
anti-fertility sign. Or cortisol is high and not metabolizing, or cortisol metabolizing too quickly. So just being able to know your full in-depth hormone profile and being able to address all of those factors so that your body can feel the the best in
Mhm.
every part of your cycle is going to be huge. Is going to
Yeah.
be a key, right? Uh,
Yes.
so that will be really helpful. The second I would say is getting rid of toxins. And I know that we
Mhm.
talk about this to the death, but um it's it seems like it's never enough, right?
Oh my gosh, they're
I
so pervasive. I feel like every couple of months I'm like discovering a new like, oh my goodness, I need to let go of that lipstick. That's, a bad choice, right? It's
right.
like there's just always more
There's always,
reworking.
yeah, and there's always like more data coming out, more research, like, oh crap, that wasn't so good. Um, so I think like the lowest hanging fruit is going to be um things like pads and tampons, which
Mhm.
I feel like yes, I would just
Drives
love
me
to
bonkers.
get
Like,
rid of
oh my
them.
gosh.
Let's just be done with
Wait,
those.
can I share one little story about that?
Yeah.
So, I had run out of my organic tampons and realized it like a moment too late, right? My cycle's very normal. I don't know how I manage that, but whatever. So we were in a small town in Michigan, and I went to the grocery store and I was like, okay, okay, Tampax has a damn applicator. Why do we need applicators? But that's another story. But it says organic, right? So I
Right.
get it, and I go home, and then in the meantime, I go to Amazon and I have my order for my go to, and I'm looking at the box and I see this little asterisk asterisk, and it says contains organic cotton. So it's not all organic cotton, but it
Oh
does
my God.
contain organic cotton. Anyway,
Wow.
so yes,
Wow. The fact that they can put it
ladies,
on the label.
read the fine print. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So I think, and there, I don't know if you've been seeing all the papers right now. It's like there's a whole buzz going on about tampons having lead, cadmium, all kinds of heavy metals. organic and non-organic, they are the same. They
Oh,
still
I
have heavy
actually haven't
metals.
heard that. Is that right? Oh my goodness. How is
You
that
know,
possible?
well, because it's if the heavy metals are in the soil
Yeah, it's
just
in the
like
cotton
plant just
itself.
sucks it
Yeah,
up.
sure, sure. Right.
So it's unfortunate, but those
Yeah.
like organic still going to be slightly better because
Mhm.
they're not going to spray glyphosate, which is
Right.
really heavily sprayed onto cotton. That
Mhm.
cotton absorbs it all, and then we insert it right into our vaginas. Glyphosate is one of the most detrimental to the microbiome, which
Mhm.
the vaginal microbiome is being connected to all kinds of things from egg quality to implantation to growing a healthy human, all connected to our microbes that are in our
Mhm.
vaginas and the rest of our reproductive system. So it's anything that disrupts that is going to be problematic. So the best is going to be menstrual cups, and then if you don't like those, then cotton, like organic cotton reusable pads,
Yeah.
um, and and then later, if you don't like any of those options, then cotton underwear, like
Mhm.
cotton,
Like the
pe-
reusable.
menstrual underwear. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
those types of things are, I think that's the biggest. And I was saying this to one of our ladies the other day. She's doubled over in pain in every single cycle, and she uses pads and tampons. And I was like, listen, I could work with you, you pay me thousands of dollars, or I'm going to give you this free advice, which is get rid of the pads and tampons. And I guarantee like 80% of the pain goes away, like literally
Mm.
overnight. And
Just
she was
using the
like, are
cups,
you
the menstrual cups.
serious? Yeah, just from using
Yeah.
cups. Um,
Uh-huh. But what
so
are they made of? Are they made of rubber or what?
it's silicone. So medical grade
Okay.
silicone is what you're
Okay.
looking for with the cups. And
Okay.
there are there oh, our world is so beautiful and so problematic.
I was like, I
You
know
can
there's more
go
to this,
you
right?
can go to Target and get disposable cups that you
Yes.
basically throw away. They're made out of plastic.
Okay.
Please don't put plastic in your vaginas. It's
I
just
know.
as
That's
bad.
as you were saying that, I was like, that's where my mind was. I was like, are
Yeah.
they plastic? But no, the
Yeah.
ones you want are silicone.
Yeah, you want the
Okay.
medical grade silicone
Got
cups,
it.
and there's
Okay.
lots of them. You just can't buy them over the counter. Like you just go to
Got
Amazon
it.
and get it. Um,
Great tip. That's amazing.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. So that'll help a lot. And then the last tip would be the mindset. And
Mhm.
there's a mindset that is either pro fertility or anti fertility. And most people, when I say mindset, are thinking like, yeah, of course I want a baby. And yeah, I have a positive mindset about it. It's not that. It's, are you a type A control freak?
Mm,
Or are you able to relax and let go and surrender to the process
mhm,
and the journey? And then the other piece is around safety. Like, how safe do you feel in your body, in your relationship, and in your environment? And
mm.
that, between those two mindsets, I don't know if mindset is the right word there, because it's not really like something you can change your mind about, right? It's like every woman I've talked to is like, yep, I've been a type A my entire freaking life. And I'm like,
Yes.
great, we're gonna help support you to change that, right? Like it's gonna be a
Right.
process. But really like shifting out of that type A control tendency into, I can surrender, I can let go, and I'm okay going with the flow is
Mm,
is going to support fertility. And then being able to like find safety and reaffirm that safety in every aspect of your life is going
that's
to
awesome.
support. baby making.
Yeah, I could definitely get that. Yeah, that's really awesome. Those are such great gems. Oh my gosh. Well, you have been incredibly generous with your knowledge, Dr. Aumatma. And will you please tell our listeners where they can find you if they would like to explore partnering with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very active on Instagram at Holistic Fertility Doctor.
Awesome. Wonderful. And
All
then
the
just to
info
say
there.
it again, if you haven't yet downloaded Egg Meets Sperm, Dr. Aumatma's podcast, I really encourage you to do so. She has some, what you heard today is just the tip of the iceberg of her knowledge. And thank you so much for the awesome work you're doing and for being so generous.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Dr. H.
It's been such a pleasure. All right, y'all. So if you found this useful and you know others who would find this conversation useful, please do share it. Our commitment is people thriving and inspiring others to do the same. So thank you for being a part of this, and we hope this makes a big difference for you and your life. Bye.